2 Hunter Valley women die each week from breast cancer. In an attempt to reduce these figures, the first mobile breast screening bus was launched 2 years ago. It has visited communities throughout the Hunter.
We've screened over 16,000 women and found almost 100 breast cancers. The great majority of those are early, and the women have been treated without having to have any mastectomy.
Following the success of the first bus, a second was officially launched today. The Health Minister John Hannaford praised NBN for raising the money for the bus through its telethon. The state government has committed an extra $320,000 for the running of the program. The minister says this type of service may soon be provided in other areas across the state.
If it's as successful as we expect, then this will be the model for buses right across the state, and it'll be good for industry here in the Hunter because it was designed and developed here.
The second bus will be on the road from tomorrow. Jane Anderson, NBN News. "18-year-old Debbie McCabe is a trainee manager at Grace Brothers. She has just won the general retail category in the track skill competition. These championships are for people under the age of 25 who work in either retail, financial services or office support. Joanne Sloan manages the babies' wear department at Best and Less at Garden City. She won the retail self-service category. These 2 women, together with the 2 other winners, Julie Harris and Tracy Hoare, who both work at the Newcastle Permanent Building Society, will take part in a study tour of service industries in the United States. Jane Anderson, NBN News. If these final year architecture students at Newcastle University had their way, this is how the skyline of Sydney would look. Gosford would have a hotel and boat harbour, and Lake Macquarie would have an arts centre on the edge of Spears Point. These models are the culmination of their year's work. After the examiners have awarded their points, the public will be invited to peruse the exhibition.
The benefits are that they've learnt to be fully professional. They've had to cover every aspect of architectural practice, plus some of the fringe areas as well, some of the entrepreneurial bits and pieces of architectural practice, if you like.
The architecture display will be open to the public for 3 days from tomorrow. Meanwhile, on the other side of campus, the arts students have been hanging their work. Students of the Associate Diploma of Creative Arts and Craft are showing off their creations. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Newcastle City Council is confronted with not only a recession, but a budget deficit of $120,000. Although the council has reserves of $35 million, its officers have responded to the hard times by drafting a budget for 1992 that cuts deep into many services. Among the budgetary recommendations, a $1 jump in garbage fees, a reduction in roadworks by $139,000, and a $175,000 cutback in beach improvement programs. Other proposals include the winding down of the winter fuel appeal, which elderly people who rely on the service say is a cold-hearted cut.
It'll make them feel even more like second-class citizens. They feel that they've been abandoned.
Library services have also been targeted. Lambton Library has been earmarked to close, much to the disappointment of local bookworms.
I've quite often used it. This is my HSC year and I've quite often come down here for reference books or photocopying. It's been very handy. It's only a walk from my place. It's been really good.
The cost cutting extends to council itself. The town clerk, Barry Lewis, says efficiency reviews of all sections of council will be held. Also 22 jobs are likely to be shed, but Mr Lewis says that will be achieved through voluntary redundancies, not by sackings. The council's Building Services Director, Harold Stewart, says his department's resources are already stretched to the limit. Mr Stewart says as a result, building applications are taking up to 10 weeks to process, and the city's fire safety program is being inadequately maintained.
We have established a program, but we haven't really implemented it, except in a very piecemeal fashion.
Does that mean there could be fire traps in the city that are going unchecked?
I wouldn't say they're fire hazards in the sense of being fire traps, but it's simply because of they're old. We really should be looking at them and seeing what upgrading is required.
Year 11 drama students from St Francis Xavier School had an audience, and primary students at St Joseph's were given the opportunity to see the pages of the play they have been studying come to life.
To see them performing in front of these kids here is just such a valuable experience for them and as for the audience, and it's great to see the interaction between the senior students and the primary school students, because that rarely happens.
Hating Alice and Ashley is a popular play with young students. This Year 11 drama class will be performing it at a number of schools throughout the Hunter.
Thank you. Right.
Cheered on by their army of fans, the competitors raced through sprints, long distance and field events.
Now look up when you throw it. Oh, wow.
Tonight, 14 athletes will be chosen to represent Australia in the Pacific Games for intellectually disabled students in Darwin next year. But while it was competitive for some, there was a touch of relief to the rigours of racing.
They're happy and smiling. You only got to look around, you can see that they're having the time of their lives.
The 4-day tournament finishes tomorrow. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The 500 staff at Allendale Hospital have been told that to stay within the government's budget allocation, around 15 nursing positions will have to go, or a ward at the hospital has to close.
The quality of life of elderly, aged citizens of our community that no longer can live at home is going to be downgraded.
So far, the hospital has shared 18 jobs to meet the $980,000 budget shortfall. One area hard hit, according to the union, is the nurses' training centre. Instead of 50 students, there are now only 16 nurses receiving training at the hospital. Despite rumours of inadequate patient care, hospital spokesman Paul Moore says patients are being showered daily and the quality of care is not being jeopardised. The nurses' union today imposed bans on clerical work in protest at the impending cuts. The proposal has come from a Sydney company called Stockrington Rail Waste. During the last few weeks, the principal of the company and former Newcastle trucking operator John Stickpowich has approached a number of local councils. The plan is to bring thousands of tonnes of Sydney's garbage by rail to the Stockrington site. Nearby councils of Maitland, Cessnock and Lake Macquarie would also be encouraged to use the dump, making it a regional facility. They would then be paid royalties. The figure being bandied about is somewhere in the area of $2 million. According to Mr Stickpowich, the plan was first proposed 18 months ago and the government has been fully informed. Environment Minister Tim Moore says the plan will not be given detailed consideration until the middle of next year. The company is yet to commission an EIS or lodge a development application, but Mr Stickpowich says the 1,500 hectare site will take around 2 million tonnes of garbage from Sydney a year. The facility will have a life of around 50 years. The site is on the border of Lake Macquarie and Cessnock councils. They have yet to officially respond to the plan, but the millions of dollars in royalties being offered means the plan is definitely worth considering. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The man was working on the antenna in Bennett Street, Raymond Terrace, when he slipped, falling onto the roof. Fearing that he may have suffered spinal damage, police and ambulance officers carefully lifted him to the ground. He was taken by the rescue helicopter to the John Hunter Hospital.
It was a solemn march through Hunter Street, protesters walking single file to the beat of a drum. Then, after a moment of silence, a memorial service for those who died when Indonesian soldiers opened fire on a funeral crowd. The exact death toll is still not known, but eyewitnesses claim at least 100 people died and another 100 were injured. Jose Felipe fled East Timor during the Civil War 16 years ago, and he says it's time the Australian government realised the plight of his people.
If they can campaign for Tiananmen Square and Bob Hawke coming on TV crying his eyes out, and any other part of the world like South Africa, I think they should do more for something on their doorstep.
His friend Kamal Barmadaj, a student at New South Wales University, was one of those gunned down. He was also a vocal campaigner against Indonesia's forced annexation of East Timor.
He was a great campaigner for East Timor, a good friend of ours. It's a sad thing to lose a man like that. We've been campaigning without any violence, and this is what we get.
take the koala off the road, stay with the koala, and then contact the Native Animal Trust Fund.
What's the best way to do that? Obviously, people...
Despite bitter opposition, mineral sand mining commenced on the Myall Lakes site in 1974. Since then, the company Mineral Deposits has attempted to replant and stabilise a 120-metre high forested dune. Through a program of native seed collection, topsoil respreading and drainage work, the dune now provides evidence of sustainable natural viability. Among 4 finalists for the award, Leamington Coal Mines was recognised for a tree planting program near Singleton. The 5-year program involved children from 14 local schools and will eventually see more than 22,000 trees planted on open-cut mine overburden. Last year, the award was won by Coal and Allied for environmental management of open-cut operations in the Hunter Valley.
It's a little bit hairy, it was very dark, although we had lights on our kayaks.
The Wilderness Society was demonstrating against felling trees for wood chips. Protesters in canoes formed a line across the harbour in an attempt to stop the Shinsendai from berthing at Kooragang early this morning. While they succeeded in slowing down the process, they weren't able to stop the vessel from being tied up at the wharf.
Kept coming through and forced us underneath the docks. We couldn't, we had to come out round the side.
The Shinsendai is loading tons of wood chips. Boral's Timber Division says the wood chips it exports come from sawmill waste in northern New South Wales. The company says if the waste was not chipped, it would be burned. However, the Wilderness Society disagrees.
They're beautiful trees. They should never be cut. If Boral wants wood chips to send to Japan, they should grow their own trees. Just like if you want sugar, if you want wheat, anything else, you harvest it yourself. We think they should plant trees, they should harvest trees.
The Shinsendai will take on the second part of its load from Tasmania later this week. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Wyong Shire has been identified by the government as one of the state's major growth areas. To cater for this, Council has spent $1 million planning 2 new suburbs called Warnervale and Waldalba. Under Council's plan, 27,000 residential lots were to be released during the next 20 years. That would, in effect, double the population of Wyong, making it as big as the city of Lake Macquarie. But all this hinged on the state government and its contribution of $4 million, which would provide sewerage and water for the first release of land. But going against his cabinet committee, Premier Greiner has refused the funding.
We're looking to the government for infrastructure costs of about $4 million in the first year. And the good news is that we weren't asking for a handout. We're prepared to repay that out of Section 94 contributions at a 7% interest rate, a real interest rate. So it was a minimal requirement of the government, and we had no reason to believe that we wouldn't succeed.
In this letter to Council, Premier Greiner sees land fragmentation as a potentially serious impediment to the proposal. But according to Council, although the land is owned by many different people, this will not stand in the developer's way. Already 3 developers have acquired around 800 lots. Council believes the government's decision will have wide-ranging impacts on the Shire.
We'll have to have a fresh look at our position, but as I understand it right now, it'll freeze development after about 1993. That's not good news for the Central Coast.
According to Council, it also puts a question on infrastructure already built, including this $10 million sewage treatment facility. Without new residential development, it remains 85% underutilised. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Over the past 3 years, the NIB Charity Day has raised some $60,000 to aid various worthy causes, and today's recipient of the Celebrity Hack-Around was the Tingaira Centre for the Hearing and Sight Impaired. An early coaching clinic by Alex Mercer tried to straighten out a few flaws for the weekend golfers, but alas for some, it was far too late. Making an appearance in Newcastle again and being on the right side of the barracking for a change was rugby league giant Wally Lewis, who wasn't wrapped in his own game.
Oh, very ordinary. Yeah, I don't profess to be any sort of golfer. I think today's just going to be more a fun day than anything, and I'm glad because that'll probably suit my style as a golfer.
The King was delighted to give a hand for a worthy cause, and so was the Nine Network's midday regular Ched Towns. Ched is totally blind, but his strength of character has stirred the hearts of millions right across the nation. A new challenge eagerly accepted.
I'd support it, you know, without any worries, without any hesitation here. Great to see all these blokes out here doing the same thing and enjoying themselves in the bargain too, you know, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
And there wasn't anything wrong with his game, making solid contact on most occasions and putting like most of us would like to. Ched's driving skills, however, may need a little honing before we let him loose on the highways. Many other celebrities joined forces with Wally and Ched to make the day a roaring success, and with an auction to be conducted later tonight, more than $20,000 is expected to be raised for the Tingaira Centre.
Vandals broke into the SOS Centre on Wharf Road shortly before midnight, smashing a rear window to gain entry. Much of the destruction was caused during their hunt for money. A jukebox bought by the Salvation Army in Melbourne was smashed for a few coins. The jukebox was sold to the Salvos at a reduced price, which they doubt will be repeated. Elsewhere, the vandals ripped apart a pay telephone for a few more coins. From that point, the destruction appeared senseless and random. Chairs were thrown through windows, a kitchen fridge was overturned, and billiard balls were thrown around the room. Salvation Army officers are stunned that the centre has been attacked for a second time in just 2 weeks.
We really don't understand why. We have no reason, there is no reason why they would have to attack the centre twice in a couple of weeks.
The centre has some security precautions, but it relies on establishing bonds of trust with the young people who need their support, most of whom are deeply disappointed by the destruction.
Most of the young people who enter the centre here are disgusted in it.
Police inquiries are underway. Staff spent the day cleaning up in the hope that this will be the last time the centre is attacked. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Decorations have been hung and preparations are underway for Christmas. Shoppers' nerves are being eased by daily entertainment in the mall. More than 2,500 children from 27 schools in the Newcastle and Lake Macquarie areas will offer visitors a little Christmas spirit. Today it was Barnsley School's turn to sing carols.